The basis for all government is built on the trust between those governing and those being governed. In the past several decades, however, American trust in the government has waned and is currently at all-time lows. When did this decline in trust begin?
Citizen trust in government has been dissipating for some time, and honestly, where it really took a turn was the Watergate era. It started to shift there, and you saw a huge growth at that time in people who identified themselves as independents as opposed to Democrats or Republicans as part of that. And then it has grown, and grown.
Part of the decline in trust results from things government actually did to cost people's trust. We saw a steep drop in trust in government after the Vietnam War, after Watergate, that never has been recovered, really. I mean, there have been little spikes. There was a period during the Reagan administration, period during the Obama administration, where we saw some increases in trust briefly, but they don't last long at all.
My opinion, why that's taken place is the redistricting that's taken place in the congressional seats has awarded folks that are the most extreme version of their parties in many cases.
A product of hyper-partisanship. Is that what's happened is people have increasingly become polarized, and the parties feed into this, and then as a result, it makes government very ineffective and incapable of functioning, and then people lose confidence.
We have designed the system such that it rewards extreme behavior. And I was reading yesterday, one of the things that President Obama plans to do in his post-administration life is work on this issue. It doesn't have to be this way. You know, these lines are drawn by people. They could be drawn in a way that center-right, center-left candidates are those that have the biggest chance of winning. And if you come from that perspective, then all of a sudden you're rewarded when you go to Washington to get things done, because that's what the vast majority of people want.
What causes this distrust in the government? One major reason is the biased media and their narrowcasting to just show highly partisan views of current events.
The advent of 24-hour cable news helped create this environment, because before the internet we had that. Now, prior to 24-hour news, most news was two-sided. It was relatively balanced. Like if you look at, even if you look now at like 6 o'clock news, the network news, which is not where most people get their political news, it's relatively balanced in the sense that they will report positions from the left, positions from the right, try to bring in equal experts on each side. But then you go to 24-hour news, and then from there, Fox and CNN get on. And Fox is the one who really figured out to target a market, right? And so Fox said, we're going to target largely the conservative market. And so while you still at least get lip service to the liberal left side, they're largely, it's dominant, their market's the conservative market. That's who they cater to. MSNBC, which didn't used to be this way, did the flip side, and came that way. And what CNN does is somewhat tries to split the difference.
We have all these sorts of media that when people do even small things that they shouldn't do, it gets spread all over the place very quickly. We see our leaders on a day-to-day basis. We see their flaws, the mistakes they make. When you go back to that more trusting age, people didn't have as much exposure to their leaders as people. So I think part of the decline of trust is just an awareness people didn't used to have, that the folks governing them are not that much different from the people they know in their day-to-day lives.
One of the largest contributors to that polarization, I think, is digital media, is that people now can self-select out what they get information flows that just reinforce their predispositions, and the algorithms of social media help them to do this. And then and then they get chock full of one-sided information, which then makes them completely opposed to anything that's against what they would think, and then as a result of that, legislators, members of Congress respond to that polarization and have an inability to act, which stymies government and then makes people think that it's ineffective.
Well, media coverage has been very cynical. I mean, when leaders do something, the way it gets interpreted is, what are they trying to get out of it? You know, what coalition are they trying to put together? Whose votes are they pandering to? The TV shows and the movies, all institutions, all authority figures are shown as in negative light. Fathers are shown badly. Corporations are always doing something bad. So the diet of cynicism is pretty consistent in our culture.
So, for instance, let's say when you have a Republican district that only awards somebody that's super right-wing views, and then it could be a Democratic district that's super left-wing views. And you go to Washington, and a lot of these folks, when they go to Washington, what their motivation is to get reelected, you know, as opposed to do the most good they can do. So if you're in one of these districts that only supports or reinforces extremism, you don't have an incentive to find that middle ground with people from the opposite party where the trust building takes place. So the whole machine stops in terms of federal government. And so, of course, people are looking to government for solutions. Oftentimes they do. People are critical of government, say they don't need it, but government is who they turn to for basic things like roads and, you know, clean water, clean air, protection, etc.
Candidates who are capitalizing on the media, that what they do is they constantly feed this us versus them mentality, and to where compromise is a horrible, you should never do that. Like, compromise is failure. And as long as they continue to promote that message, and as long as then the media knows that people respond to this kinds of messaging, then everybody is going to be constantly hearing bad things about the other side. And if that's constantly happening, then everyone's always going to think that someone is stopping and taking from them, and we'll keep going this way.
It's really the cultural politics, the morality issues, the social struggles. That's where we have the nastiest conflict, where one person's sense that you have to give me what I want or you're a bad person runs up against the other side's, if you get what you want, then we're bad people. There's not really a compromise there. It's not a compromise between abortion is murder and you have no business regulating what a woman does with her body.
Yeah.
There's not an intellectually defensible compromise, and people have a hard time compromising. There's no compromise between, if you stop me from marrying the person of my choice, then you've fundamentally violated my civil liberties. Versus, if we start allowing men to marry men and women to marry women, our culture's on the skids toward oblivion. There's not really a good middle ground there. We're Democrats and Republicans for a reason, and election after election, that reason comes back.
What can be done to fix this? Is there a way to fix this? What happens now?
Given how digital media works, I don't see people becoming, suddenly not becoming one-sided about things. The whole way social media works reinforces people's predispositions, like I talked about earlier, and so I don't see that changing. Eventually, the American public may break us, right, to where there is a tipping point where we're like, we have to learn how to see each other. If we don't learn how to see each other, we're doomed. That's the only spot it can go, is to eventually break up, separate into multiple countries by that kind of thing. And like, people think, oh, that would never happen. And I'm like, have you studied history at all? Do you think we live in a post-history era now? I mean, that's all that's happened across the course of human history. And so to think that it couldn't happen again that's naive.
Sadly, I'm not sure much of the distrust can be fixed by government officials. I mean, they're constantly trying to survive, trying to get things done while this cynical public, interpreted through the cynical news media, is watching them and giving them a hard time. I mean, trying to lead in Congress right now is just insane. I mean, the different egos you have to put together and the criticism that people will get back home, it's almost an impossible task. I think that where we get trust is when things go well. I mean, when the economy does better, people tend to become more trusting, for example. Unfortunately, I think the leaders have to wait until news gets good enough that we become trusting again.
Building trust across a community requires honesty. It requires reconciliation in some way. So you have to deal with injustice if it happened in the past and recognize it and then move forward. I frequently say to folks that we can't control what happened in the past, but we can deal with it today, and we can act on it going into tomorrow, into a world that is recognized as a more equitable, just place for everybody, and so where everybody feels like they have a shot at a hopeful future. Until people feel like they're being heard and they feel like they have a pathway forward, there's always going to be a lack of trust associated with that. So it has to start with some of your basic components, like basic human services, education, health policies, to where the zip code that you're born in doesn't determine what your outcome is going to be.
So on the one hand, I don't have high expectations for Donald Trump as a leader. He's inexperienced. He's going to be trying to lead in a very difficult context. He's already dealing with widespread opposition. On the other hand, if he does well, which isn't impossible, he could build up trust in a way almost no one else could, because expectations are so low for him. I mean, if he comes in and he's not ideological and he stitches together coalitions of Democrats and Republicans to do what he wants to do, that is usually where you get the improvement, is when people get a lot better than they expected.
Mm-hmm.